Hello, everyone. Welcome to Crime Family. I'm your co-host, AJ, and I'm here with my sisters, Stephanie and Katie, as always. And this week on the show, it's going to be a little bit of a different episode than normal because we're not going to be doing like an overview of a case. We're going to be more talking about a recent book that we read, and we're going to be just talking about our thoughts about it. And this is a case that you're most likely familiar with if you listen to this show, but we did, I think, 4 episodes on it last season. So this week we are going to be reviewing a new book by Amanda Knox, and the book is called Free: My Search for Meaning, and it just recently came out, I think, in March or April, so it's relatively new. And for those of you who don't know, Amanda Knox is infamous for being wrongfully convicted in the murder of Meredith Kercher back in 2007 in Italy. And she had nearly a decades-long legal battle, fighting the courts and ultimately getting exonerated after several attempts, and her boyfriend as well at the time. So, yeah, just like a brief overview, Meredith Kercher and Amanda Knox, they were roommates in Italy, and they were studying abroad, and they had only been there for a couple of short months, and Meredith was brutally murdered in their apartment. And Amanda and her boyfriend, Raffaele Sollecito, they were sort of the first two to go into the apartment after the murders had happened, and they were the ones who had called the police. And really from moment one, the media really took hold of the case and really misconstrued information and sensationalized, the prosecution's theory, and really made Amanda and her boyfriend, Raffaele, look very bad, look guilty. All these theories that weren't even true about Meredith being killed in like this sex game gone wrong, and that Amanda was this sexual deviant, and basically slandered her all throughout the media. And so, yeah, which led to her giving a wrongful, a false confession based on the interrogation. And they used that false confession against her for the next 10 years and just, planted evidence almost, or, withdrew evidence that didn't fit their case. And it was just a horrible, horrible case of a wrongful conviction in the murder of Meredith Kercher. So if you want kind of a deep dive on the case itself, like I said, we did do a 4-part mini-series on this case last season. So just type in Meredith Kercher to the search bar, Crime Family Meredith Kercher, you will find it, and listen to all 4 parts, because we do go into the nitty-gritties of the murder and the crime scene and sort of the media sensationalization of this case. So because we already did that for 4 episodes, we're not really going to be spending time talking about the specifics of the case or the legal proceedings. And honestly, that's not really what the book does either. I do believe Amanda wrote her first memoir a while ago that did kind of go through all those details. While she was still in her legal battle, I believe she wrote her initial memoir, which goes into, the murder, the case and the trial and all that stuff. So you can read her book or listen to our show, but this focus of today's episode is really going to be just about her Amanda Knox's new book, and just our takeaways from it, and just anything that stood out to us, and just a general discussion about it. So we do recommend that you go read the book yourself or listen to the audiobook as well. Amanda Knox, she narrates it for the audiobook. So it's a pretty interesting read. So we'll, just search for her book online and you will find it if you would like to read it. So I guess to start off the discussion, do either of you have sort of any initial thoughts, or what are your takes on the book initially?
I liked it. It was like what I was hoping it would be, like her inner thoughts and like introspective of what she went through and stuff like that. So that was good. Some things that like stood out to me that I think we should discuss are obviously when she met back up with the prosecutor. That was like, I don't know, my heart was like beating the whole time. I was like, what's gonna happen here? I also think it was interesting when she talked about like Raffaele and kind of their relationship that they had like during and after this whole thing happened, and how they met up again. And also I think it was just interesting how she talked about like when she got out, how all of her stuff that she had just kind of felt like meaningless, that she had like a room full of stuff. Like how that's like not really needed in your life, and how she kind of figured that out as she came back and was like, what is all this stuff? It doesn't feel like mine. So those are the things that kind of stood out for me. Oh, and also Mike.
Yeah, like, so I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it wasn't like a wow factor for me. Like I enjoyed listening to it and like listening to like the details of what she went through and like kind of like what Katie said about the things that stood out to me. But like I don't know, for me it was like there was a lot of detail that didn't necessarily need to be in the book. Like I could have done without it. But then again, like the part that Katie was talking about, like the prosecuting stuff, like that was very interesting to me. And when she met up with Raphael, during and after the trial, that was really interesting. But a lot of it to me was just okay. Like I feel like I don't know, maybe I'll need to read it a second time, but I like it wasn't really like a wow factor for me. But there were some points in it that I really liked. So the whole thing wasn't a negative for me.
For me, I feel like I like the detail because I can actually picture like what she's seeing. Like she talks about like the birds chirping and like the greenery and stuff like that. You can like kind of have a picture in your mind of what she's seeing rather than just being like, I was sitting on a balcony or something, you know? It's just like, well, what did you see? And I don't know. I like those details because it gets you like into what's actually happening.
Yeah, I think that's like the point of a good author, right? Is to give you the detail. Like if you just sit there and say, I was sitting in a jail cell. Okay. You're sitting in a jail cell. It's like, okay, but you tell us about the jail cell. What does it look like? And then like the details, she does go into a little bit of like what her life was like behind bars for the 4 years or close to 4 years that she was in prison. So that was like interesting to me. The chapters that were sort of about some of the other people that she was in there with and her life. But I guess I just, not a disclaimer really, but I guess going into reading it, like if you're going into it thinking that it's going to be a deep dive into the specific details of the case, that's not what this is. Because like I said, she already wrote a memoir kind of about that. And also there's lots of other places that do that. So I don't really think that was even necessary. So it's really just more about, obviously she talks about some of the details of the case, but more so in how it relates to whatever topic she's talking about now, like how it relates back to, you know, when she goes home for the first time after getting out or whatever it is, right? So it's not like she's sitting there taking you through the trial necessarily. But so I guess that's the first thing. Like you might be disappointed if that's what you're going into it thinking it's going to be.
Yeah, but also, I mean, the name of the book is Free, My Search for Meaning. And like I think the whole point of the book is like her being free of this whole thing that she got caught up in, right? Like she doesn't want this to define her. And so for the whole book to be about that is kind of like going against, I think, what the whole point is for like, obviously it's a part of her, but like move on from this chapter in her life, basically. And I think that's like the whole thing's about, basically.
I think for me, I was kind of like, I envisioned the book being like her like obviously it was outside of the trial and everything, but I think for me, I was looking for more like what her life was like now and like how it made her feel and like all the memories that were bringing back. Like I didn't really want to listen to like, I don't know, some of the time she went into like the trial and stuff like that. Like, 'cause I already knew that. Like, but I don't know.
But she didn't really go into the trial. Like she didn't sit there for hours talking about the trial.
She did she did go, like she did talk about it for a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I was just thinking the word free was like Katie said, like I was thinking afterwards. I wasn't thinking like she was gonna like tell me like from the time she got arrested to the time she was exonerated.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, I would say more than half of it is about after. Like most of it is taking place when she gets back from Italy, and you know how she deals with like all the scrutiny that she had, how she has no anonymity now, and like the jobs that she worked after she got back and how that was, and then like the people that she dated after, and we'll probably go into more of that, and like how she came to terms with it, and then it's like her going back to Italy all those years later to like sort of make it come a full circle, or to just like wrap up tie up those loose ends, I think, because towards the end of the book it's sort of all leading up to that. And then towards the end is like when she meets with the prosecutor again, face to face, and meets up with Raffaele in Italy. And so that's kind of like, it's like what happened in the in-between, like when she got out, when she went back to the US, and then when she goes back to Italy to like revisit all this stuff for the first time, and like all the growth that she had done and had to do to get there. So I think that's the point of the book. And so I would say, to your point, Stephanie, like 75% of it is after. So
yeah, maybe I could just, I don't know, maybe I thought the whole book would be about that, not just like 75%. I don't know. Like, I liked it. Like, those parts I really liked about talking, when she talked about being free afterwards and all of that. I know I just could have done without the like flashbacks of the trial and stuff like that. I don't know.
Yeah, but I do think also that those details too were important. Like, I think the amount of time she spent on it was like necessary to explain what's happening like later, kind of, right? Because that's also, she's sort of like tying it to, because the whole point is like how she came to be ultimately free of everything that happened to her. So she has to revisit what happened to her in order to explain how she overcame it, kind of thing. So
yeah, I think it would have been impossible for her not to mention any of that, because then, like, especially if you're not familiar with the case and you're like picking up this book for the first time ever hearing about her, like, you'd be completely lost if she didn't go into some of that. You'd be like, what the fuck is she even talking about?
Her first book isn't that goes into all the case and stuff like that?
But yeah, and full disclosure, I didn't read her initial memoir. I think it came out like in 2000, I don't know, 15.
Yeah, I never read it either. But I'm just thinking like that's what it was about, like a whole entire trial and all that. Like, I mean, yeah, she had to revisit it. I mean, you can't make a book without mentioning that stuff, but I don't really think it was, I don't know, maybe we all different opinions. I just didn't think it was necessary, but that's just me.
You just probably didn't, that probably like the least interesting part for you. Just 'cause
yes.
you heard it before, basically, in a way. But yeah.
But we didn't, I mean, I was interested, like, I didn't really hear anything about her, like, time in prison. So, like, to me, that part was interesting, too, because when we covered it, we never really talked about what her experience was like being in that prison. So, if anything, I think I wanted to hear a little bit more, like, maybe spend a couple more chapters about that, but I get that it wasn't the point of the book. But I liked those chapters, like, where she talks about, like, how she learned to cook with, like, all the other women in the prison or whatever. And, like, I don't know, I just liked hearing those details. So to me that was
yeah, and it was interesting that she had like planned, like, she wanted to be a translator. That was kind of like her career goals, and then that's kind of what she became in prison in like a different way, though. So that was interesting as well. And yeah, I think like hearing about what happened to her in prison and how she like survived those 4 years, if she went into more detail about that, I think would have been interesting. But yeah, like you said, that originally wasn't the point of the book. The point of the book was like the freedom from that. So yeah, I think it was good.
Yeah, and I guess we can go into, since you mentioned it, Katie, we're talking about Mike. What was his name? So what were your, Katie, maybe like talk about, if you haven't read the book, talk a little bit about that, and then your thoughts about it, if you'd like.
Okay, so Mike's not his real name. She never says his real name. She just calls this guy Mike. And it's like like Amanda and her friend are kind of out at the bar one night, just like hanging out, talking about stuff. And then like this guy comes up to them and like starts talking to them or something and says that his friend just got out of jail for being wrongfully convicted of a crime. And then he brings over this guy Mike and they start talking about it. And then Amanda brings up, she's like, oh, I was wrongfully convicted and I'm out of jail as well. And they kind of, Amanda and Mike kind of form this friendship based on that, and they hang out and they like sort of date, like see each other a little bit. And like she says that they connected because of kind of what they both went through. And she even like brings him over and meets her family and everything, and her family gets like a sketchy vibe from him. They're saying like this guy is, trouble. And she's not seeing that because she explains this kind of like, it's kind of like weird that she not weird, but it's interesting that she has like this like trust, more like trusting of this guy than maybe she would have been before, because she felt like she knows what he's going through. And anyway, they end up like moving. She moves to New York and this guy like moves in with her and stuff. And he starts being like someone that isn't working. Like he asks her for money. She has to give him money. He like hangs out on her couch and like doesn't do anything all day. And like what he says he was wrongfully convicted of, his girlfriend said that he was violent towards her or something. And like this girlfriend had made up lies about him. Anyway, it turns out that Mike actually was not a good guy and was super violent and dangerous. And like Amanda ended up having to like run from her apartment, like run away from him. And she didn't want, I never heard of this. And it's probably because they never called the police. Like she didn't want the police to be involved because this is before her like exoneration trial. So if something like this had come out where she's like hanging out with criminals and stuff like that, it just wouldn't look good on her. So she never even called the police. She called her lawyers who told her not to call the police and they'll figure it out themselves. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of that, which I don't know. When she talked about Mike, I was like thinking like this was going to be a good guy and they, formed this like good friendship and stuff, but then it turned out to be the opposite. So what did you guys think about that?
Like, my first initial thought was like he was going to be a good guy, but like then back in my mind I was like, what kind of guy goes up to girls and say like, oh, my friend was just exonerated out of nowhere with no like context to put, like no hello, how are you? Like, I don't know. I just felt like that was really out of the blue and kind of a coincidence that they came up to those two girls. Like, anyway, I thought he was a good guy, but then like in back of my mind I was like, oh no, this situation seems kind of sketchy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I assume he went up to her because he knew it was her, and you said that so that he would, I don't think it was like he just happened to say that and she was Amanda Knox who happened. Like it's because he knew who she was that he said that, I'm sure. But yeah, that whole like section was very like interesting to read as it, because you don't really know what, I mean, kind of like based on what she's saying, like you assume like, okay, this doesn't end well, or obviously she's not with this. Like I knew that this wasn't the person that she, obviously I was not going to say the real name, that it's not the person like she ends up with. So I was just interested to see like how it kind of fell apart and what the specific details of it were that. But like also I find it crazy that because of everything that happened to her, like she has to, every situation has, she's not like a normal person. She can't just handle it the way that a normal person would, right? Because of that stigma that she has against her because of the perception. So it's like when she truly is, something is happening to her and then she ends up as the victim of it, she has to go like straight to her lawyers rather than just going to the police and reporting it as someone normally would. So it felt kind of bad that it's like the situations when these happen to her, it's like she can never just react as a normal person would, because there's that added layer of, well, if it gets out, what's the media going to think? Or how is the media going to spin this? Or how are they going to whatever, right? So
yeah, and it's also like because of what she went through, she kind of had more empathy for that kind of person, like who was also quote unquote wrongfully convicted, and it kind of it made her like more vulnerable in a way, because a normal person or someone that hadn't gone through that might not, have had that empathy for him. And she was like, oh, I totally know what he's going through. He's wrongfully convicted. I'm going to be there for him. When somebody else would be like, oh, I don't know about that. So yeah, it just made her more vulnerable. But you'd think like her guard would be up more than somebody else. So yeah, it's just interesting that little mistake was like a big one, actually.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like I was thinking like because of what she went through, like she'd be more guarded towards who she meets at bars. And I'm surprised she even like, because I remember her saying like it was hard for her to go out places sometimes and do things. I'm surprised she even went to like a bar where she could like meet people. Because I feel like it'd just be hard for her to like have genuine conversations with people if they know who she is because of what she was wrongly convicted of. So I don't know. It's surprised to me like she actually would decide to go to a bar and like with her friend. But I guess you have to try to live a normal life. You can't just be sheltered for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and that was like a big topic in her book as well. Was like people expect her not to live her life now after this happened to her, but like she's gonna try and live a happy, normal life again. And so, yeah, people think, oh, she's out at bars, like, celebrating and, like, drinking. And it's like, she even said this more than once in her book. Like, people think, like, how dare you live a life now? But, yeah, so, yeah, it's just interesting that, like, I guess you think her guard would be more up after all this, but it was actually, like, for that kind of person, her guard was, like, down when it really shouldn't have been. So, just an interesting point.
Like, I feel like when I was reading this book, like, I felt, like, so bad for her, just, like, from outside, like, after all the trial and everything was over and she was trying to get back to a normal life, because, like, can't imagine, like, everywhere she would go, like, people would just, like, try to, like, ask her questions, or she wouldn't be able to get some peace. She just, like, she kind of just wanted to be, like, she kind of like a celebrity, but for all the wrong reasons, you know what I mean? Like, she just wanted to, like, well, she just probably wanted to finish school, go back to kind of how she lived her life before that. But then it's like, maybe all of this happens for a reason, and now she's trying to be, like, a better person because of what happened. Do you know what I mean? But I know, I just felt, like, super bad for her.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard. It'd be like hard enough if you were someone who was actually guilty of a crime and you do your time and you're, infamous because of what happened, and then you get out and you're trying to live a normal life, and you can't live that normal life because of what you did. But, like, it's even worse the fact that she didn't commit the crime. Like, everyone thinks, or a lot of people think she did, and she didn't. So it's like, and it also just makes you think, it's kind of scary. It makes you think of how easily something like that can happen, just wrong place, wrong time. And there's really almost nothing you can do about it, right? If the media and the law enforcement is after you, you have no power in that situation. So it's like almost kind of a reminder of how easily something like that can happen, and how vulnerable she was to having it happen, because obviously, which we probably talked about when we covered the case initially, like with the false confession and everything, like you're not privy or, like, knowledgeable on the police techniques that they use to get false confessions out of people. So you're just going along with the premise of, like, well, I'm totally innocent. I know I didn't do this. So there's no possible way for them to convict me of doing something I didn't do. But when you actually know a little bit more of how easily it actually can happen, or how often it does happen. So yeah, it really just makes you sad that she can't even live a normal life because of someone else's error. Like, how unfair the system was that they just picked her to penalize for this crime that she didn't do, and through no fault of her own. Her entire life is changed after that.
Yeah, and I think the fact that obviously she was in, like, a country that she wasn't actually from, and so the language barrier for one thing, and just, like, the cultural differences. Because I remember she was saying, before she was meeting with the prosecutor, like, in the book, like, afterwards, after all this, and she's just meeting to talk to him, like, she forgot the word grieve in Spanish, and so she had to look it up, or in Portuguese, or yeah, and is it Spanish?
Italian?
Oh,
Italian.
yeah, Italian. Okay, yeah, she forgot the word grieve in Italian, and so she had to look it up, and then she realized there actually isn't, like, a word for grieve. And then when they translate it, it's like to cry is basically what you would say. And so she's like, that's like a huge reason she thinks that there's, like, this miscommunication, because in that country, if you're grieving, you're, like, crying and you're very obviously upset. While she was just like she said, she was in shock and she wasn't crying and didn't have that, like, those upset emotions. And so that's why they didn't think she was grieving or upset, because she wasn't portraying how they think you should look. So, and it was like a big, like, language difference and stuff like that. So I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, and one thing I also wanted to talk about too was the chapter where she talks about how she went to the stand-up comedian, and he tells a story about her not knowing that she's there. That would just be a nightmare, like, for someone. I'm just mostly an introvert, so, like, to have being in the crowd and having you singled out and no one else knows you're there would just be a very uncomfortable feeling. So when that chapter was going on, I was, like, also tense, because that would just be the worst thing. ever.
Yeah, and the fact like his joke was that she was a murderer and that like his friend left him alone with Amanda Knox and he's like, "Oh, she had knitting needles. Like she could have stabbed me." Like obviously it's just a joke, but like to her where it's like not even true that she's a murderer. Yeah, it was just obviously it was upsetting, but yeah, it just like happened to like he was telling a joke and she happened to be there. And it was like ironic because it was like, have you ever been in a room with a famous person and not know it? And she was just like the ironic thing was like he was again, like he didn't know I was there. And yeah, but it's just I don't think they don't really think about the other side of those jokes when it's like a real person.
Yeah. And also just the weird, like sort of the serendipity of it, the fact that because it was her boyfriend at the time who was doing like an interview and she was just there with him. Like it was nothing to do with her. And she was just there. And so he like his friend or something had a conversation with her. And like it was just a very not really memorable thing in her mind. Like it was just, I had a conversation with this person when my boyfriend was doing a interview or whatever. But like the fact that like then she happened to be at that comedian's stand-up show later where he tells that story again that was one of the chapters that stood out to me because it was like it would just be a nightmare scenario. And then she was like, just feeling like no one knows you're there, so no one's like looking at you, but then you would all of a sudden would feel like everyone's automatically looking at you. So it's just that was crazy to me. And also like just the fact, and we probably talked about this when we covered the case originally, but the fact that Rudy Gaudet had actually gotten so little time in jail for the crime is also wild to me too. And she doesn't really talk too much about it, but she does mention it, how like he had
she mentions that he got less time for being convicted of a crime that he actually did than some people serve who are wrongfully convicted. So it's like some people are wrongfully convicted and they stay in jail longer than he did for actually being convicted of like a rape and a violent murder. It's crazy. I don't even know why he got out. Like that is kind of crazy to me. So yeah, and then he got out and then he assaulted someone else after that. So I mean, we talked about that in the original episode, but it is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's just crazy to me. And so I guess the next portion we could talk about is sort of her encounter with this prosecutor that is a really big part of the case, obviously. He spent years targeting her, adamant that she did it, adamant that she was guilty, and then the fact that she years later goes back to Italy and actually meets with him. And like I said earlier, kind of brings it all sort of full circle again. Katie, what was your thoughts about that chapter of the book?
So yeah, I thought it was really interesting that she decided to like reach out to him in the first place. Like they were actually writing letters back and forth to each other before they decided to meet up. And it was kind of frustrating how he was just kind of like skipping around an apology and like skipping around the fact that he thought she was innocent and that he made a mistake. Like he never actually said that. Like he alludes to it in some things that he says, but he's never like, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake. You're innocent." Like those words never came out. It was like, and then she eventually says that she believes that he really believed at the time that she was guilty. And now she feels that he is on her side and understands her. But it's just crazy that he would never actually come out and say that. And like, I forget some of the things that he actually did say. But yeah, you can tell that I feel like he is remorseful and that he does feel bad about what happened. And that her reaching out to him is like a huge relief for him because that burden I feel like is off of him now because he can, they're not enemies anymore. They're just, I mean, I don't know if you call them friends, but they've reconciled, I guess. It was interesting.
Yeah. But I think, and it's interesting that she, comes around to thinking like that ultimately she thinks that he really did believe that she was guilty. So it's not like he was knowingly going after and targeting the wrong person. But I mean, I feel like if you get into the details of the case, it's like there was a very glaring sort of, very glaring omissions of evidence or manipulation of evidence and straight up interference with the crime scene and stuff that like as a prosecutor, the person who's because also he was not only the prosecutor, but because it was in Italy, like he was the lead prosecutor, but he was also the investigator. Like he was at the scene of the crime the day that it happened, which we talked about it in the original episodes that we did on this. Like that's a little bit different, a difference in Italy of like the fact that the person who's there the day of the murders at the crime scene, the very first day, is also the same person who's then leading the prosecution and the trial years later, which is not how it's done.
Yeah.
Here,
so for him to, like, as a prosecutor to say, oh, the evidence was bad and they botched the case would be him saying that I fucked the whole thing up and it's all my fault. So I feel like that's why it was harder for him to, like, say that he made a mistake, because it was, like, him the whole time that would have fucked everything up, which I think he finally comes to, like, the realization that he did fuck it up.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if it was like in the States or even here in Canada, you as a prosecutor, it would be a lot easier for you after the fact to be like, well, I just went with the evidence that I had. The lead investigators really botched the crime scene and manipulated things, and I was just going based on their manipulated evidence. But for that person to be the same person who was also manipulating the evidence and also following through with it in trial, it would be a lot harder for you to admit it. But also for me, it's like, why would you agree to this meeting and you're having this, you want to reconcile, but you're not going to then apologize or admit sort of the stuff that you did, like up front. She has to sort of like interpret it like, well, I do think that this is how he feels, but it's like, you can't just say it. Like, why are you here in this meeting if you can't acknowledge your wrongdoing? Like, isn't that the point of why you're here?
Well, because I think he does, like, not in these exact words, but he basically does say that he's happy that she's out and he believes that that she should have been let go, and he's happy that, you know, she has a daughter and a family, and he's happy that she's happy. So that makes you believe that, he believes that she's innocent and didn't deserve to be there. But the fact that he never actually comes out and says those words is a little bit frustrating to me. But yeah. And to, like, honestly, I feel like the whole fact that they had this relationship, like friendship sort of afterwards, and like she trusted him enough to like send a picture of her daughter to him before anybody else, but before like the whole media release and stuff like that. I was surprised that he was able to have that kind of relationship with her, because I just felt like he wouldn't be that open to it. But obviously, I don't know him. But that was surprising to me.
That's part of the book that really stood out to me. Like, it was like very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, engulfed in the, like, in that whole chapter that they were talking about. Because, like, to me, you know, prosecutors don't usually meet up with their defendants ever in, like, any cases you ever, like, see. So for me, it was very interesting. And you are right. Like, I feel like he kind of is apologetic, but, like, he's too much of a, like, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? He's too proud of his job, what he does, to actually say sorry, because most prosecutors aren't really sorry for how they do their job, I guess. So, but like, even for me, like, I was surprised she even wanted to, like, make amends with him because of what he put her through. Like, to me, like, I don't think I could ever be that brave and be like, put all that stuff aside and be like, oh, let's be friends. Like, I don't know. She's very very brave and to do that, because that's something I would probably never be able to do.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the whole, like, the freedom theme is, like, to have that weight lifted off your shoulders. Like, that's, like, the whole thing is, like, this hatred towards him and, like, her hatred towards her. And, like, he's the whole reason this happened to her and stuff like that. And so for them to, like, reconcile that and just have that, like, lifted off of her, I felt is, like, the whole part, or a big part of her, like, freedom, I guess. So I think that was important for her to have that lifted.
Yeah. And I think it's the whole point of the book, or a big part of it. It's like, she can't change the fact that this did happen to her. So it's like, she can either choose to be free of it and work through all the stuff that she does in the book, or just have this weight that's burdening her for the rest of her life, which it's like, that's not going to change what happened. It's only going to, like, prolong the bitterness that exists, you know?
Yeah. So I was happy to see that they were both able to, like, kind of reconcile and get over it. And then she kind of accepted the fact that he was doing his job, and it wasn't, even though it felt like a personal attack towards her while he was prosecuting her, it was like he didn't really know her And he even says now that he knows her, like, you know, it wasn't really about her. It was just about the case. In some twisted way, it wasn't about her, really. It was his job, even though he was attacking her, basically. But you have to, like, read the book to, like, kind of understand what he is talking about, what she's talking about, and kind of, like, understand what he means by that and what she means.
But it's kind of, yeah, like, it's kind of hard to, it's weird to say, like, it's not this personal attack, when it really was a personal attack, the way that he set up the whole scenario and talked in the court in the trial about, you know, basically trashing her character and saying that she was a completely different person than she really was in order to fit his narrative. Like, that to me is seems like a personal attack.
I guess it was like a personal attack to who he thought she was. But now that he knows that's not who she was, it really wasn't a personal attack because that wasn't really her. So it's sort of a twisted way. It wasn't about her. It was who he thought she was. And now that she's not that person, it wasn't about her, right? So it's like a twisted way to think about it, but I feel like I understand what they're getting at, right?
Yeah. And like you said, if you read the book, like it makes sense when you read how she describes it or when you actually read the details of it. But yeah, also I think for him too, I think it's easier for him. The fact that it all sort of worked out in the end in terms of her getting out and her getting finally exonerated and that she's out and she's free now, like for him, he doesn't have to. It's a little bit easier for him to get rid of that burden, because if she was still in prison and she was still wrongfully convicted and would have been for 30 years or whatever, and if he ever did start to have doubts about whether she really did it, that's a lot harder to kind of reconcile that. But I think the fact that it all worked out, I mean, with no help from him at all, but actually in spite of him, really, or despite his best efforts, it worked out. So I think in a way it's a little bit easier for him to get over it or to feel a little bit better about the situation, because it ended up working out in the end.
Yeah, he's probably relieved that she got out, because if he finally felt that she was actually innocent, but she was still in jail because of him, then yeah, that would be like a huge burden on him. So he probably has this huge relief. Not only that she forgives him, but that she's actually out and he didn't like ruin her entire life, just a big portion of it.
But I mean, he didn't. Oh, I was just going to say, he didn't ruin her entire life, but he ruined her entire reputation to about 50% of the world population or people who know about her. Because I mean, I think no matter what she does, 50% of people who know her name are going to think that she's a murderer who got out of prison. And there's nothing she can really do about that, which is unfortunate. But yeah. Sorry, Katie, what were you going to say?
Like, I never heard that they had met up before this book. Like, was that like a news release? Like, did you guys know that had happened? Or was this kind of like the big reveal in this book, that they had met up and like made up? Or was that,
no, I never heard
it happened, because I had never heard that. No. Like, it wasn't a story anywhere else.
Like, I don't think, like, it sort of made it, like, it felt like it was a big reveal in the book when I was reading it, because it was like, well, I don't remember hearing about this. So, but I'm thinking, like, we covered this case just a year ago. I don't think we talked about that. I don't think we knew that at the time, if I'm remembering it correctly. I mean, it was only a year ago.
I had no idea.
It was a year ago.
Yeah, that was like brand new information that they had like reconciled and were like writing and then met up. Like, I didn't know any of that. So,
yeah, I know we did talk about in the last part, I think, of our 4-part thing, that she had gone back to Italy and had met up with Raffaele again, and they had, you know, spent a couple days or whatever, and she met his kids and he met her kids or something like that. So I knew that had happened and that she had been in Italy, but didn't know, I don't think, that she had met with the prosecutor. So yeah, that was new information for sure. But yeah, it was pretty crazy. And I think, like, one of the things, I think it's in the last chapter or something, that just like a phrase that sort of stood out to me was, it's the fact of, like, well, obviously the whole theme of the book is freedom, as we've talked about, but where she says that you can feel, and this isn't going to be verbatim exactly, because I listened to the audio book version, so I don't have like a copy of the book in front of me that I can go point to the line. So it's not going to be verbatim, but something about, she's like, you can feel, what she's learned is, like, you can feel free in a prison cell, but you can feel trapped in a penthouse. So that was just a line that stood out to me that I thought was like poignant. It's really all about like not necessarily your circumstances, more so how you're able to like overcome it and be.
Yeah,
I guess
it's your mindset.
Yeah.
It's how like you decide to like think about the situation and how you decide to react to like your circumstances. So it's like, yeah, you can feel stuck, but like if you change your circumstances, change your mindset, then you're not stuck anymore, kind of thing. So yeah, that stood out to me as well. Just kind of like that whole viewpoint is like, it's all up to you, like your situation. It's all not just in your mind, but like how you deal with and think about your own situation.
Yeah. And I think like also just coming to terms with the fact that for the rest of her life, she is going to be infamous, or she's going to be known for this. So it doesn't really matter. And like I said, there's 50% of people who, I don't know if it's still 50%, but let's just say it is. 50% of people who are aware of this case maybe still think she did it. And I'm sure any YouTube video with her in it or about her, you're probably going to see in the comments, like a lot of comments of people saying that, oh, it's crazy that they let her out of jail. Like she's clearly guilty or all this shit, whatever. And to be fair, I think I was under the assumption that she probably did it because I didn't really do a deep dive into this case until we covered it, or maybe slightly before that. So if you're just going based on the media's narrative of her, then obviously you're going to think that she's guilty because they just spent years trashing her and that she was this horrible person. So clearly that's going to sway what your opinion is. So really, ultimately, it's just about like, she can't ever change that fact. So no matter what she does, half the people are going to be furious with that she even has the chance to do it because she's out of prison. But you know,
one of the things
if she can
sorry
go.
No, because one of the things I was kind of hoping that you would kind of mention would be like Meredith's family. Like, I mean, she might have mentioned it a little bit, but like to me, like if you want to be free, I feel like you should kind of like reconcile that relationship. I know they didn't really know each other, but like, because I'm sure her parents are like furious because nobody's in jail right now for her murder. Because he's out right now, I'm assuming, right? Because she got out and then he got out. So like, there's nobody there to feel accountable for what had happened. And part of me was like, maybe she should like communicate with her family and like kind of go like share her side of the story and like maybe have that like, I don't know, that what's what I'm looking for.
Well, she does talk about that. She did reach out to them. She does talk about that towards the end, but she kind of, and she was also putting it into perspective of like, also in order for like for the victims of the like the family is also victims in this case, right? Meredith's family, because they lost Meredith and they'll never get her back. So in part of their healing or their closure, it's like part of it is they need to believe that you did it just so that they have the closure. And so that's why she says in a lot of wrongful conviction cases, it's very rare to see the family of the victim agree with an exoneration. Because in their minds, in order to heal or to deal with it, it's like that person was guilty, they're in jail. So if that person's exonerated, they don't think of that person as being also a victim in this whole situation. They think of it as a guilty person walking free. So she did talk about how she did reach out to them. I think she said she sent a letter to the family through her lawyer. She had the lawyer, like, she wrote the letter or whatever. So, but also it's how far are you going to push it? Like, if they think you're guilty and they don't want to hear from you, trying to force it's not going to help the situation. So it's like, she can write a letter and can be what she does, but ultimately it's up to them if they want to accept it or talk to her.
And she also talks about how like this is not Amanda's fault at all, but how when it happened, like all the media was always Amanda's name and like Amanda's picture. And she was like, it was almost like Meredith was like on the sidelines, even though it was her. She's the one that was murdered. She was like the murder victim, but it was all about Amanda. And she says like that's even today still like it's Amanda Knox is like the headline in most cases. And she's like, she should have just been a footnote like the other roommates. She's like, who everybody forgot about, which is like, I forgot about them too. I don't even know their names. And she's like, that should have been me. Like, nobody should know my name. It should have been about Meredith the whole time. But the way the media spun it, it was about Amanda. And that's why her family was disappointed or like pissed about that as well. Because it's like, she even said, like, her family said, Meredith's name is not out there. It's all about Amanda. So you can see why that would be frustrating as well. And it's true. They just like latch on to Amanda so hard.
I think that's why, like, when we do cases, we always do the victim as our title for like our episodes, because that often happened in a lot of cases. Victims are put at the back burner because of the suspects or the people who've done it, like, are front and center, and that's all you ever hear about, because you never really hear about the victim.
Yeah, the killer becomes a famous name.
Yeah. So I kind of like when we started doing that, it's kind of like putting the victims back in the front seat, because that's all it's supposed to be about. But I do get why even Amanda would be frustrated. Like, I don't even know her roommates' names, and that should have been her too.
Yeah.
So,
like, I'm sure we, in those 4 episodes we did on this case, I'm sure we mentioned their names, but I can't say them offhand. I don't remember who they are. I definitely wouldn't know what they looked like. If I passed them on the street, I wouldn't know their face or barely their name. So yeah, and I think because when we were releasing those episodes, it's like, if you type in Amanda Knox, you're not going to find our episode on that case, because we don't title it Amanda Knox. It's the murder of Meredith Kircher. So yeah, but I think when you're like probably like putting out an episode, it's like you want to put Amanda Knox's name, because it's like, well, if people are searching for the case and they want to hear about it, but it's like we put it as the victim's name, and yeah, that's how we just do it. And then we try as much as possible. I mean, in some cases, like I'm thinking of this season, we did one on that woman who kept her like stepson in the house for decades. Like, the victim was unnamed. He is anonymous, so obviously we couldn't put that. But so as much as possible, we do try to like have the victims be the names of the episodes as much as we can. And that's stuff that, like you said, that's the reason, putting them back in the front seat of the case, because it's their story, and it's like the story of what happened to them.
Yeah. But this episode really, because I mean, Amanda says it herself in her book, like, she is a victim, like a different type of victim as well. And so, I mean, obviously she's still alive. She's not a murder victim, but yeah, like, this terrible thing happened to her. She was a victim of the justice system. So I feel like, yeah, this episode is really Amanda's story, even though it is tied to Meredith, and it always will be. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll put Amanda Knox's name in this title of this episode, because we're talking about her and it's her story. But yeah, oh yeah, what was I had a thought of something I was going to say, and it left my mind. Oh yeah, I was going to say, that's also what is so also infuriating about wrongful convictions too, because in most cases, if it's a just system, it's like, okay, somebody gets murdered, there's a crime, there's a victim of the crime, and then it's like you're putting the person who's responsible for it away. There's like a victim and a perpetrator. But when you have wrongful convictions, it's like, yes, there's the victim of the crime, but then a wrongful conviction creates other victims. The person who's wrongfully imprisoned, that person's family. So it's like, it just casts a wider net of who's the victim in this case. Like, now it's like, okay, but when you think of it, it's like Meredith Kircher was, the first victim of this case. And then Amanda Knox, and also her boyfriend, Raffaele Sollecito, were also victims as a part of that.
And
not
Patrick
in the same
Lumumba.
way, obviously, but
It says Patrick Lumumba was a victim because she was coerced to like name him. So he lost, his business, and his name was dragged through the mud as well, and he was arrested. So yeah, obviously not as big as what happened to Amanda. But yeah, there was like 3 other victims in this case. I think one thing that's interesting, like Amanda talks about like Raffaele, and she sort of like alludes to how like it could have been a lot worse for her if he wasn't such like a good person, because she says that he could have thrown her under the bus. Like he could have lied and said that Amanda actually wasn't with him that night, and he doesn't know if she was home or not. And so if he like got like some sort of deal and like threw Amanda under the bus, then he could have gotten out while making sure that Amanda never did. So it's like she's like thankful that he was actually honest and wasn't going to just look out for himself, because he got put in jail because he didn't do that as well. So it's like thankful to him, which I think was a good point. I never like really thought about that either. So yeah, I mean, she's lucky in that way that he was like loyal to her.
Yeah, it would have been very easy for him to just throw her under the bus. Yeah, and then she does talk a little bit. I mean, I guess the moment to talk about it really has passed, because I was going to mention it when we were talking about the prosecutor stuff and that. But then there was like kind of rumors about the fact that like there was like someone was an informant. Was it Rudy was an informant for the police or something? So like it's like they had incentive not to want him to be in prison. So there was like also theories about that. Like the prosecutor was like aware of that or something. I don't know. She talks a little bit about that, but again, the moment has passed because I should have brought it up earlier. But I also did want to just say it because like that part was super interesting too, of like there's obviously nothing to substantiate that theory and there's no evidence to suggest it is. But if that is the truth, then it really just makes everything else. It's so obvious why things happen the way that they happened, if that is the real story behind it. So
yeah, and it also makes more like an understanding of why like Amanda and Raffaele would have got thrown in there so hard, because they didn't want Rudy to be the murderer. But it's like, if that's not true and he wasn't actually like an informant, like why did they push so hard for Amanda and Raffaele if they already had a murderer? Like that's like a thing that just never going to be resolved, I don't think. Like they wanted Amanda and like they weren't going to let go of it no matter what. So it's crazy.
Yeah, it's really like the question now is what is the incentive to pin it on her? They could, if they put half their energy into actually finding the real killer, which they obviously did end up finding, Rudy Gaudet, but it was much later. If they put half as much energy as they spent putting innocent people into jail as they were focusing on the real person, they could have been solved much easier. So yeah, it just makes you really question of like what was the incentive to go after Amanda so hard? It's just interesting. Overall, I think it was really a good read or good listen, I guess. And if you like audiobooks, she actually narrates it. So it's interesting to hear her narrate her own story. But yeah, overall, we liked it, or I liked it. Steph, meh, and Katie liked it.
I mean, I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it. Like I did like it, but it wasn't like the best.
I know, that's why you're meh.
But I mean, also it was my first audio book that I've ever listened to, so maybe that was a problem.
So
it definitely made it more interesting that it was Amanda, because sometimes audiobooks aren't like the author or who they're about. So that made it like 100 times better, probably.
Yeah, can you imagine if it was some random other actress person reading? Wouldn't have. Because sometimes they get like actors to like do audiobooks because they can have like emotion and stuff like that. But it's like, if it's a true story and it's written by a person and then that person isn't then narrating it, it's like weird. Mm-hmm. It's like, why? So yeah, but if you like audiobooks, I would recommend listening on audiobook, but reading it in print, I'm sure, is also just as good. So yeah, overall, good book, good story. And let us know also too if you liked our discussion of this, because we can also do this. We're thinking of like having some type of, not a side series, but like just having episodes here and there of the show that are kind of like a book club sort of thing where we're talking about a book. And maybe in the future, if you liked it, we can, let you know in advance that we're reading this book, and like you can have your own questions and stuff that you want, specific questions. So that's also an option too. So just let us know if you liked this episode about Amanda Knox's new book, because we love true crime, and we can also do the same thing for documentaries too, like watch a documentary and talk about it, which we have done before. But yeah, so overall, very good book, and kind of just sort of wraps it all up, right? Like wraps up her story, how she kind of came to terms, the closure, and kind of tied up all the loose ends. So I think it was a good kind of period to her whole story, I think. So yeah, we'll put a link to the book in the show notes, so you can buy it wherever you get books, Amazon, if you're in Canada, you can get it at any major bookstore, Indigo, whatever. So definitely definitely check it out if you're interested. I mean, we spoiled the whole thing for you, so maybe it's a little bit less interesting now, but still, read it. It's good. Yeah. So thank you so much. It was great to discuss the book, and I'm glad. I hope you enjoyed it as well. So you can find us on all the social medias: Crime Family Podcast on Facebook, Crime Family Podcast on Instagram. You can check us out on TikTok. Just type in Crime Family Podcast. You'll find us. And you can email us at crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com and give us your case suggestions, your feedback, anything you'd like. We'd love to interact with you. You can also find us on YouTube. So subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find the video versions of all of the episodes, all of the recent episodes, and also on Spotify. So if you listen to us on Spotify, you'll be able to get the video versions of all these episodes. And YouTube is also where you can do that. So if you like the video, check us out on Spotify or YouTube. And yeah, we'll be back next week with a brand new case, brand new episode. And until then, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.